All right. So on today's episode of the NBA Big Board Podcast, myself, James, my guy Leif over there, we are going to discuss the day two winners and losers of the 2024 NBA Draft. Gonna want to stay tuned. Hi again. Thank you for making Locked On NBA Big Boy your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On NBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. All right, so I got my guy Leaf over here. He's Team Utah Jazz. Before we talk about the second round players and where they were chosen, we get our ideas. Can you just give me a quick rundown of your overall report for the draft and how you feel your Utah Jazz did with their selections?
Yeah, I thought the first round was interesting in the spots I expected it to be interesting, meaning picks 5, 6, 7 really set the table for the rest of the first round, in my opinion. I think in some capacity you kind of knew what was going to happen in the first four picks. So 5, Holland. I expected it to be Holland or Buzelis, so it didn't really throw me in for too much of a loop. 6 is where it got really interesting for me personally, because as soon as Cody Williams wasn't taken by the Hornets, which is what I expected, I really started to believe the Jazz might get him, which they ended up doing. But also 5, 6, 7 was really interesting because 6, Saloun, I don't think there was that many rumors tying him to the Hornets. 7, Klingon. They already have Robert Williams and DeAndre Ayton. I don't think people expected Klingon, 1, to be on the board, but 2, go to a team that had no need for a center. 8 was a great pick, in my opinion, in Dillingham, but he goes to Minnesota, who traded up, even though they were supposed to be interested in Dillingham to, if he started slipping, to trade up. Well, they got up to 8 out of fear someone else would select him, and they must really have a lot of belief in Dillingham like I do. 9, Edie's, going to get a lot of attention. I thought they were going to go with a veteran, so it being Edie slightly surprised me, but I thought it was going to be Carter. So by the time I got to 10, this is where the Jazz bias comes in. I was thrilled because Cody Williams was number 5 on my board, so the Jazz got number 5 at number 10, and then Isaiah Collier went 29th, and I had him number 12 on my board. And I think both those guys have a lot of traits. So the Jazz fan in me was ecstatic. The draft lover, the guy who's done a lot of prep work, watched a ton of film, I felt kind of validated in a lot of like my research and the way that the draft board fell. Time will tell how accurate it was, but in terms of representation of, this team really liked a player I liked or disliked the player I thought was overrated, I felt like it was good in that sense. And I think the draft board opened up after pick 6. And I think the only other really surprise to me was how far Connect fell. I mean, he fell to 17. I don't think any of us thought he was falling out of the lottery, honestly. So once he fell out of the lottery, it became very interesting to me.
Yeah, Connect sliding to 17 was definitely a shock. I think obviously the biggest shock of the day was AJ Johnson going to Milwaukee at 23. I had mentioned before in previous podcasts that from what I had heard, don't be surprised if he goes higher than you expect. Well, I didn't expect 23. I was thinking like 38. But Bucks believe in his talent, and it'd be interesting to see how that works out because of their timeline and just how far away I believe he is from being able to contribute, especially with a team. I think they're either the oldest or the second oldest team in the NBA. So today was the first time that the NBA decided to do a 2-day format. What did you think of the 2-day format?
I didn't like it. I didn't think it did anything. Like who other than the draft junkies like us watch the second round with the same gusto they'd watch it if it was the full event. I know they're trying to make it a special production, but it felt almost a little greedy to try to separate it into 2 days by the networks. And I didn't think it was all that well performed. Like there was no focus on the picks. You'd go 3 or 4 picks between analysis of one of the players. They'd be like, in passing, this guy was just taken 44th. Like I didn't like the way they did it, but it is what it is. And I think it's not necessarily a bad thing to put a spotlight on the second round, but I don't think like the NFL needs to. It would just be too long. the NBA draft is long, but it's not like this arduous process. So I think they should make it one day.
Yeah, Bob Myers was saying on the telecast that it's helpful and from his standpoint that the second round picks were 4 minutes long instead of 2 minutes. So I guess you could say the GMs, the organizations were the biggest winners of day two. The draft process splitting up day two because again overnight you got some time to think about it, so it benefits them. But from like the viewership standpoint, I mean I know the timing of it with the presidential election probably wasn't the best. But I mean who's even going to tune into the second round on a Thursday night anyway? But having it was at 3 o'clock my time, and I'm like trying to watch it while I'm working, and it it can be tweaked. I don't, but even then, like last night, the draft ended at it was still a 3.5 hour for the first round. So I don't know what the NBA is gonna do going forward. They're gonna obviously keep this format because of the CBA, but it definitely helps the organizations. And I guess you can say, well, we should see that it reflects in the picks that they were made because you had time to like sit on it and think about it. And then, of course, at the end of the day, Shams, he did his thing, and you knew about the Exhibit 10s and the two ways and the summer league contracts. Um, so let me ask you another question. Your biggest surprises going through the second round. Did anybody get selected higher than you thought they would get picked, or did anybody fall further than you thought they would get picked?
I was a little surprised by Mogbo, just right at the top of the second round. It's a very Raptors type of pick in the sense that obviously Masai Ujiri had loved Giannis. This is well documented. Scotty Barnes was a guy who had traits, length, strength, not necessarily shooting touch, handles the ball well. And maybe just because of history of those type of picks, the Raptors feel like the team that would take a swing on a guy like Mogbo, who's like a supersized guard in a power forward body, who struggles to shoot the ball. So that one surprised me a little bit, but not flabbergasted. I thought there was a couple players that fell out of the first round that were swooped up by kind of smart, shrewd teams like the Knicks getting Kolek. I thought they could have taken him at 24. They took him at 34. Johnny Furphy, I thought was going to be a first rounder. He was taken at 35, and the Pacers are the recipient of Furphy's services via trade. And I thought that was a shrewd pickup, a guy who can just play run and gun and shoot open threes and work kind of in the shadows behind other players that are a little older, but he can develop and be athletic. Like it fits his services. So I wouldn't say I was stunned by any risers or fallers, but those are a few that stood out to me in the early stages of the second round.
Yeah, again, those guys, I was surprised by the Mogbo pick, but obviously knew Filipowski wasn't going to stay on the board too long. I thought Tyler Smith was going to go rather fast. I had a first round grade on him. I think Milwaukee's a good spot for him. Again, we talked about Kolek. Knew Furphy wasn't going to be there long. But really, like the name that sticks out the most to me as far as like falling, I didn't think Nikola, and they pronounce his name differently on TV, but it was Jurisic on TV. I was surprised that he fell to 43. Miami drafted him, but they're sending him to Atlanta. I thought it would have worked in Milwaukee had they not like reached for AJ Johnson, even at 23, or if you wanted to take Tyler at 23 and Jurisic at 33. Like I was thinking that Milwaukee needed some young guys, but they needed some young guys who would be able to like maybe crack the rotation rather sooner than later. And I like the intrigue. I like the upside of AJ Johnson. I just think he's like 2 or 3 years away from contributing, and it just kind of didn't really make sense with their timeline. But I thought Jurisic would go earlier, and I'm kind of surprised that Cam Christie lasted to 46. I know he started to generate a really good draft buzz for himself. He's a really good catch and shoot guy. He's real skinny too. And I tell you what, man, him and his brother, they stand next to each other, dude. I can't tell them apart at all. Like, I got two brothers, and people like say, "Oh man, you guys look like triplets." I'm like, nah, we look like we're related. Like those two look like the exact same person, and it's like kind of cool that they both ended up in LA. But the biggest, I mentioned with Rich, I thought Kevin McCullough was gonna slide, and he did slide. but I thought Jurisic would be one of the first names off the board in the second round, and I really thought he was going to get a first round grade. So, but yeah, it's just going to be really interesting to see how this shakes out. But you know what? We're going to take a break. We'll talk about a couple guys who were selected in the second round who we think that may be able to crack a rotation, who's going to spend time in the G League. We'll get to some biggest winners, biggest losers, just overall in the draft. Stay tuned. First, let me tell you that this episode is brought to you by Game Time. So, with Game Time, it is the authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying Major League tickets. So again, Game Time, what makes it so great about it is that it has last-minute deals. You can save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. They have flash deals where you can save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of a game or an event. And then they also have zone deals where you can save even more when you choose a section. Let Game Time choose the seat. So take the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use Locked On NBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Before we get back to the draft, let me ask you a question. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all this shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channel app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. So, before we took that break, we were going to talk about some of the winners and the losers and also some of the biggest deals of the draft. So, Leif, 2 rounds in, your biggest winner. Let me get your 3 biggest winners of this particular draft. It could either be for a player or for a team. I'm putting you on the spot. That's what I do.
I really liked what the Jazz did. I said that at the outset, getting guys I ranked well. But if I'm not taking the Jazz, I thought the Heat did something interesting. I thought they'd take Connect at 15, and they took a flyer on talent in Ware, who I had ranked lower. But if any culture can get a player who's had questionable work ethic, but just a lot of talent to perform, and then they took Nikola Jurisic, who I had a first-round grade on. You just mentioned him as someone you were surprised to slip. I agree. I liked what they did there in the sense of they took a flyer on talent in Kel'el Ware, who in terms of talent would be ranked well within the top 15, which is where he was drafted. And then they took a guy in the second round that I had a first-round grade on and fits their culture. Like, he reminds me in a lot of ways of some of the players who've had success there. And speaking of Jurisic, where if you put him in the right culture and you cultivate that talent, I think could be a steal. So that's the team that I didn't expect those picks necessarily from, but I liked what they got because I don't think Jurisic is that far out of the conversation from being mentioned in the same breath as a guy like Connect, whom I believed they were going to take at 15.
Let me fact check you. Is it Pelly Larson? I thought they traded Jurisic to Atlanta, and then they took Pelly Larson with the 44th pick. So,
well, if that's the case, then I rescind.
Reevaluate that grade there.
I was watching it on mute because I was at work, and if that's the case, then I rescind my take.
They took Pelly, so they drafted Jurisic, and then they traded him to Atlanta, and then with the 44th pick, Pelly Larson was drafted by Houston, and he was traded to Miami. So we need to regrade.
We need to regrade indeed. That was a weird trade because AJ Griffin got dealt in it too.
Yes.
So I take that back. I would have loved that pick at 44. The other team I thought did well would be I like what the Knicks did in taking a flyer on Dadier. And then, of course, you have Tyler Kolek, who I think fits a positional need as a backup point guard, whereas I think Deuce McBride kind of would rather play off the ball. And then I also think you get a couple players that have differing skill sets. And so I just like it because I like the upside of Dadier, and I think Kolek's a very steady player. I think if you're drafting in the range that they did, I think they did well to improve their roster around the Nova quartet.
All right. Biggest losers.
Ooh, let's see. Oh, I mean, I think Zach Edey's got a lot of pressure on him. The Grizzlies at 9 taking Edey is something I would be concerned about. So that would be one that scared me. I really did.
On that, please, because that was people been that's been a Twitter favorite. Please expand on that one. You can't just leave that. Why do you question Edey at 9?
I believe that no matter how good Edey is in the minutes he's on the court, he's not going to play enough minutes. I think the league is trending to be so quick that rim running and the ability to defend against rim running bigs is going to be vital. I think in terms of pick and roll, he's a little bit theoretical because at Purdue, what he did is he would set a pick and he would dive to the basket and post up. And I know that part of that's that their guards don't put pressure on the rim very much, but Edey was a post up, get to his right hand on a jump hook from the blocks, put his left shoulder into you, and you couldn't stop it. The NBA, that's not going to be a shot that teams want you to take very often. So I think a lot of what he does well isn't necessarily proven. And I don't think he'll be on the court enough to have the impact that you would necessarily expect from someone that big and dominant physically. I just think he's going to get overran in terms of the speed of the game. And yes, he can play, but I feel like he'd thrive in backup minutes and play in short stints, not ninth pick type of minutes that you'd expect from 9 picks. So I just think there's a lot of pressure on him. Whereas if he was picked 18th to 30th, there wouldn't be this pressure and be like, oh, well, you need to start. You need to be next to Jaren Jackson on a team that wants to win right away. Like people forget the Grizzlies were the 2 seed the year before this. They want to be right back there, and he's got a lot of pressure to perform that well. So I'm not saying that's a failure of a pick right away. I just don't necessarily like it. That's not the pick I would have made. And I don't think that Edey's a better prospect than a guy like Misi by very much, and they were taken totally different. I did like their Jalen Wells picks. I don't know if I'm going to say it was like a failure of a pick, but I just think that's the pick in the top 10 that I look at. I'm like, whoo, that's got a lot of impetus on it in this short time. Like he's got to really play well to say that was a successful pick.
Yeah, it'd be interesting how that works because like the West is wide open, right? And we know he's going to be a post up lumbering big, but like let's say Memphis is the 4 seed and you get Dallas at 5, like how's he going to play in that matchup against Luka? Like Luka is a savant, right? So like how does that work? Or if you draw Oklahoma City and they play 5 out, like how does that work? So like it's going to be interesting to see if he's going to be more than a half the game center. He played 30 because again, you draft him 9. That's a huge need for them. You have to think he's a day one starter. So it's like in the regular season, it should work. Come playoff time, that's when it's about matches, and that's when it could potentially get difficult for him. Any other losers for you?
It's such a weird thing to describe, but like Sam Presti's built up this enormous track record. I think the topic pick was a good pick, but he can't play immediately, and they've got winning aspirations. So chalk that into nothing for the short term. I don't get the Dylan Jones pick whatsoever. Like, I don't see how he contributes at all. He's 6'6". He's slow. Yeah. I know he rebounds well, but what they need is like a true rebounder in terms of a big. And like, so who's he going to take minutes from? Cason Wallace, Jalen Williams, other Jalen Williams, Isaiah Joe, Aaron Wiggins. I don't see it whatsoever. So that pick was the most bizarre to me. I like the Topic pick, but I do think it's kind of strange that they just got rid of Giddey, who if you were to look at like close similarities to Topic, like Giddey would come to mind. So I think it's very strange you'd take a younger version who's slower in his development And I know he might be the best talent available, so I typically subscribe to that method. But they're a team that could have used a fit immediately just because they want to contend immediately. So I thought theirs was bizarre. I don't want to thrash it because I actually had Topic ranked higher than 12. So like in a sense, I think that's a good pick. It just didn't make sense to me for them to do. And then the Dylan Jones pick was a terrible pick in my opinion. And I'm hoping that bites me in the butt. Seemed like a nice guy when I met him 2 years ago at the combine, but I just don't see it, man. I don't know. Presti does well usually though.
I'm right there with you. I don't know if you listened to us last night, but I didn't understand Dylan Jones. On top of the things that you said, he can't shoot, and
not at all.
Not at all. Like he's I guess a bad shooter, and he's an old bad shooter, and like he is a high usage guy who you're automatically asking to lower his usage on the team that has already 2 established ball handlers, and I didn't get it. I didn't get it. And then, like in the second round, they took AJ Mitchell, so then they took another guard, and it's like
that one made more sense to me though. Like at least he's someone who can run the show and just facilitate. Like Dylan Jones makes no sense. Topic makes sense at least in a sense of, well, it's a little weird that they took a player that's very similar to Giddey, who they were hustling to get out of there. Mm-hmm. And I forgot to mention Caruso in terms of players that are in front of Dylan Jones, but like at least I can understand the rationale of best player available on Topic. Like the Dylan Jones ones was the most bizarre pick of the entire draft to me, and I don't see it whatsoever.
My with the Mitchell pick is that all right, it's hard to crack the rotation, and he's got some talent, but like you just traded for a guard, you already have a bunch of guards, and I would have gone with some like a different kind of big. Somebody else, another kind of big. Maybe you could have took, and again, I know they want to play 5 out. That's fine, but you could have took a Dembona for a different look. You could have took Oso for a different look as far as like your bigs. But yeah, I definitely didn't get the Dylan Jones pick. Really quick, let me tell you, I think and I mentioned this last night, so I'll talk to you about it. I really like what the Wizards did. I think that they found pieces that the 3 guys they drafted all fit with developing a young team. Like I thought they did. I mean, you take Sar, he came to you. We like Bub Carrington, obviously. And then I'm a big Keyshawn George fan. And to get him where you got him, man, I believe at 27, 26.
26, yeah. Oh, no, 24.
24, yeah.
24, because Dylan Jones was 26.
Crazy. To get him at 24, I didn't think he was going to personally get past Toronto because he seemed like a Toronto Raptor kind of guy. But, like, you got a playmaking ball handler, potentially a playmaking wing, and you got an athletic center. I thought that they did a very good job. In the second round, I don't think they were able to secure anybody, but you know what? You got 3 picks in the first round, and we can both agree that this kind of draft was the fill your roster out, see what you can get kind of guys. And I thought they took 3 guys that are going to complement each other very well. And I like what they did. And also, like I mentioned on the podcast previously, I like what Portland ended up with as far as with Klingon. I think that the DeAndre Ayton days are coming to an end. If not for sure, Robert Williams is going to be on the block. And I like Denny Avdia via trade. So those are probably my 2 favorite. We mentioned biggest winners and losers. Detroit. I get best player available. I like Ron Holland. Yeah, that's gonna be tough, man. Trying to fit those guys as far as like it's gonna be tough, man. And
we did a pod. Yeah, but we did a pod a while ago about like, okay, who should Detroit take? And there's no right answer, so might as well take the guy we think has the most upside. And then you just figure out which of those guys, in terms of Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, Thompson, all those guys, which one of them is going to stick the best. I don't hate what they did. I just think it's extremely redundant. And it's going to cause growing pains and maybe stunted growth. But I don't know. I don't think there was a right pick to make. Like there was nothing that made me happy for them, honestly. Yeah. But I will say I loved what Washington did, specifically Bub Carrington. So that was a good call. I think there's a real chance Bub Carrington's the best player of those trio that they got, despite being the least heralded out of high school. Like, I think Bub Carrington's got a better chance of being an all-star than Sarr.
I think even in the short term, I think Bub Carrington can win Rookie of the Year, to be honest with you. Like, if the usage is there, he might have a chance. And this is it's a tough draft. Like, it may only take 13, 5, and 4 to win Rookie of the Year, but like,
who was going to win Rookie of the Year? It was going to be Rob Dillingham if he stayed in San Antonio. I felt
for
certain
sure
about that.
Hey, but you know what? He might be able to get you 11 off the bench. Like, they talked him up. Obviously, they were like, we didn't draft him to sit him. Like, we drafted him to play. And you have to think, okay, I have to look up and see how many minutes Conley played last year. But if those minutes come down and save him for the playoffs, like, Rob is going to get plenty of opportunity to get them up. Man, I was so happy they took him. But, we can talk about that all day. This is the Rob Dillingham fan club. We need to take another quick break here. So when we come back, we will talk about some of the biggest reaches, some of the surprises, and we're going to go rapid fire just with some names of some guys who signed 2 ways, Exhibit 10, some really deals. So stay tuned. All right, so this next segment is brought to you by eBay Motors. So let me tell you all about eBay Motors. It all starts with passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED lights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. So this last segment, really quick, let's talk about the biggest reach of the draft and your surprises. And I'll read off a few names of some guys who didn't get drafted. Actually, you know what? Let's go. Let's get right to that. Didn't get drafted. What surprised you of those names?
Justin Edwards is the big name. Like, I'm not stunned he wasn't drafted because I never really liked Justin Edwards, but I'm surprised he didn't get drafted because there's players that got drafted that I think he's better than. He's the biggest name. You could look at a few others that come to mind. One that shocked me, but I don't think there's that many people who liked him as much as me. I like Trey Alexander from Creighton quite a bit. He plays the 1 and the 2. He's got a 6'10" wingspan, guards, scored 17 points, 5 assists. Like, that's a player that I would think would be coveted, but somehow wasn't at all. Now, I don't know. That one didn't make sense.
Do you think because he ended up in Denver, right? Denver just traded Reggie Jackson for like the 3rd time. And I don't know. I know KCP opted out. So I think they said he may or may not be able to come back. And it may be Christian Brown time. So do you think that might have been a strategic thing where he says, you know what? If I'm not one of the first 5 or 6 guys selected in the 2nd round, don't draft me. I'm going to pick my location. Because for him to go to Denver, I think they need help. And they're not trying to spend any money. So that may have been a strategic move by him and his camp.
It would make me feel better about the evaluations that actual scouts are doing, because there's no way that there are 60 players better than him, or I guess 58. Like, he plays like I think people overthink efficiency at times. He takes hard shots because he's asked to do a ton. He runs the pick and roll, even though he's probably a 2 guard. He played the point guard this past year. When he played the 2 guard next to Ryan Nembhard, younger brother of Andrew Nembhard, now plays at Gonzaga, he was awesome. I actually saw him play at Ball Arena where the Nuggets play in 2 March Madness games. He was great. Nembhard was great. Kalkbrenner was great. Kaluma was okay. Shireman was great. They made the Elite 8, and it was really fun to watch him play. And ever since then, I knew who he was the year before that, where he played point guard when Nembhard broke his wrist. And they played against Christian Brown and Agbaji in Kansas, gave him a run for their money in their title run. And I was like, man, this freshman kid's really, really good. He's only gotten better. He's gotten bigger, stronger, improved his game. And he went from being on draft boards to off draft boards. So I would really hope that's what happened, just for people's valuations, or maybe I'm crazy, but I think everyone else is crazy for letting him fall.
Speaking of crazy, Isaiah Crawford didn't get drafted, and I understand the injuries. I'm clearly not a doctor. I'm not even the kid that pretends to be a doctor that gets arrested in Florida every year. But like, he's 21 and he checks every box that you want in a 3-and-D guy. And for him to go undrafted, maybe the knees weren't good, but he ended up in a really good spot in Sacramento because they need help on the wing. I'm rooting for him. I think he has a chance to make that team, and potentially, depending on what they do as far as like addressing the Harrison Barnes, Kevin Herter, whatever, he may have an opportunity to get his two-way converted if the opportunity does come. Another name undrafted, surprisingly, was Jalen Bridges. He went two-way with the Suns. Again, maybe it's a situation where I'm not one of the first 5 guys in the second round. I'm going to pick my destination. You know, the Suns are always going to need wing depth and shooters along those playmakers in Booker, Bill, and KD. What are your thoughts on Jalen Bridges going undrafted?
I feel like he had some people really love him on draft Twitter, and others kind of saw, hey, he was at West Virginia for a while at Baylor, and he never was this like all conference stud. And he had the makings of a good shooter, but he didn't defend that well. He was a guy that I had in my 40s, so I would have selected him. But I think your premise is probably right. He probably was like, you know what, there's spots for me if I choose it, and that makes sense to me. But I'm less like stringent in my take of like, oh yeah, like Trey Alexander deserved to be taken with Bridges. Bridges didn't show me as much as Alexander did.
Reese Beekman to the Warriors. That was interesting too. I know you were high on Reese Beekman. What do you think about that one? Or at least let's assume that's his decision to play for the Warriors.
Well, Beekman can really guard. So if they want to play him next to Podziemski in sometimes, or obviously next to Steph, I think there's a world in which Beekman plays in the NBA for a long time, even with his shooting deficiencies, just because he's that good defensively.
I agree. Yeah, I guess the last one that kind of like sticks out to me, we had talked about him on the podcast we did with the Pittsburgh people out there. Blake Henson to the Lakers, man, he can shoot, and I like I mentioned on that podcast we did. I wish the Mavs he could have came to terms with the Mavs, because we could definitely use a pick and pop 4 out here. Maxi Kleber is a little too tentative for me, but it'll be interesting to see how that works out for him and with the Lakers. But yeah, man, it's gonna be fun. I think they already announced that the Rockets and the Lakers are going to tip off on opening night for Summer League. That's going to be a spectacle. I don't even know if I'm gonna go yet, but yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that works out, man. But final thoughts of the draft. Taking some time off, you're gonna get right into 2025. What can your followers look forward to, Leif?
I mean, I'll be at the Utah Summer League, which happens sooner than the Las Vegas one. So I'll be seeing the Jazz, the Grizzlies, the Thunder, and the 76ers. So all of whom picked in the top 16. So I'll be seeing plenty of good rookies. I'll give breakdowns on that. Probably expect a lot of Jazz content about Cody Williams, Isaiah Collier, Kyle Filipowski. And I don't know if I'll get straight to 2025. I'll probably watch the Summer League more than I study film of the high schoolers. I'll make myself educated on what the high schoolers do well if I haven't already, which I have for the most part. And then once college basketball season ramps up, I'll be talking a lot about those players that you'll see in the college ranks. And I really wish Traore came to the States, not necessarily for his own good, but for my own ease of watching him, because I really enjoy watching him play. And if he played at Gonzaga, I think there's a world in which he challenges Cooper Flagg to be the number 1 pick.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm not gonna get into 2025. I'm gonna give 2024, even though I'm kind of tired. I'm tired of covering this portion of the draft as far as just trying to move guys and figure out who's who. Now we can see we can start our overreactions to summer league, because somebody's gonna look like hot trash in summer league that went really high. Fan base is gonna boo him, and it comes with the territory. And then we're gonna have to see who's gonna be able to adjust from that summer league. I'll probably start I have an idea about 2025, but I'll start my really in-depth analysis probably a week or so after the summer league. I know I got other stuff I got to do, but looking forward to seeing these guys in the 2024 summer league. If I go to Vegas, I'll probably post something on Twitter and let everybody know I can meet up with some of you guys. But hey, that concludes this episode of the Day 2 Winners and Losers. I am James Barlowe. That is Leif. But before we go, let me quickly tell you that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Well, that concludes our show. We will see you next week. Peace.